Hi, my name is Nicolette Johnson. I am a secondary art teacher in New Hanover County. But today I want to talk about the North Carolina standards for both middle school and secondary. I think this benefits both middle and secondary teachers because as a high school teacher, I want to know what my students should know. And as a middle school teacher, I would hope that they would want to know what my students will be going into so they can hopefully help prepare them. So I feel like this knowledge is helpful for both sides. And this all started because I saw an article on NCED about the standards, about how in the summertime they brought out the proposed standards. About November, they approved them to move on. They released a hub online that still doesn't have a whole lot on it, but it's the beginning of it. They hope to kind of do like a soft release of them next year, 25-26 school year, and then 26-27 school year is when full implementation should hopefully happen. So we have, a couple of years to wrap our heads around this. And I'm not a definitive source on this. I just know it helps when I kind of talk something through. So I feel like this is a good opportunity again to learn about these new standards and where they're coming from and what they're for, than, having to do it by yourself. This here is the article I referenced from Ed&C, and it has some good points in it, and you should read it if you get the chance. It's not that long. But one of the big differences that I saw was that instead of visual literacy, contextual literacy, and critical response, we now have connect, create, present, respond, which, in my opinion, is kind of just like very similar to our old ones, so that doesn't surprise me one bit. What I do feel like they're trying to accomplish here is the other standards, like music, like theater, they have the same four steps. So I feel like what they're attempting to do is kind of unite us, which can be both a good thing and something to be careful about, because we do have the different disciplines, because there's so much to learn, even just within visual arts, that if you try to teach visual arts and music and theater and band and orchestra, if you try to teach all those things all mixed together, you'd probably have to live 6 lifetimes to get through all of that. It's, in my mind, kind of like how the sciences are broken up into biology and physics and chemistry. Yes, they share that language across all of them, that knowledge base, and that scientific inquiry, but at the same time, they have their own particular things that they're focused on and their own methodologies that go into it. So I think it could be a welcome thing to have the similarities, but it's also something you have to keep an eye on and make sure that you're not just trying to like clump us all together in the same thing. So this is the crosswalk that shows both the new proposed 2024 standards and objectives, and to the right are the 2010 standards that are being, adapted, updated, that kind of thing. And overall, they were trying to make things more flexible for teachers, but I do think there's some instances where there's either clarification needed or it got kind of limited in a way that I don't think they fully thought of the implications. So I'm going to go through this quickly on some insights into that. The first one is to relate visual arts ideas and works with personal, societal, cultural, historical, and daily life contexts, including diverse and marginalized groups. And that seemed like a pretty good standard. It has everything we'd want, the wide variety where the arts pulls from. But the word marginalized isn't exactly, I feel, an appropriate term here, because if a student asks me, why am I teaching about this Native American art style of sand paintings, I wouldn't say, oh, I'm teaching it because I'm supposed to teach you about the cultural and societal uh, context of this marginalized group. I would say, oh, I'm teaching you about the societal and cultural impact of the Native Americans because they're a part of our history. They're a part of, sadder parts of our history that we're not necessarily proud of. And then also they're part of our current history because we live with them. We live with Native Americans in our community. So the use of marginalized isn't the best thing here, but if I had anything they could do, if they just took out that word, because diverse already covers so many aspects of making sure that we're not teaching just like a little cluster of history. So I think that word marginalized isn't really necessary in that standard. Then the next one, applied the effect of geographic location and physical environment on the development of visual arts. Makes perfect sense. Um, you are going to kind of have a kind of pride built up in the kind of artwork we make because of where we are, because of who we live around, that type of thing. Makes perfect sense to me. It also is more broad than the standard it pulled from, where it wanted to talk about the first global age of in the old standard. That probably made sense back when they were trying to line it up with social studies teachers, but having teachers collaborate with social studies teachers because they find those core concepts important and not just necessarily lining it up because it happens to happen in the same time period is, I feel, a more authentic way to teach. And the next one, explain how skills and concepts developed in the visual arts and can be applied to daily life. This is very similar to the old standard. It makes sense. It shows life skills that are really important to a sixth grader. They're going up in the ages and trying to figure out how to be a productive member, and that seems great. Explore advancements in the field of visual arts. This is a new one, and I think it has a good intention. What I feel like it's trying to do is say that, hey, art teacher that got your degree 10 years, 20 years ago, don't just teach the only thing that you were taught. Make sure you're teaching more than that. Make sure you're staying up to date with your content. So I feel like that's an important lesson for us teachers to have, is to make sure that we are aware of the advancements going on and we're keeping up with it and not just giving our students uh, advancements in the art field that aren't relevant and current to our students. Next one, identify the art skills, characteristics, and behaviors needed for success in art careers. That's great. Um, Along with art careers, I kind of wish they had expanded out, although I believe they do this in a future standard where not only in art careers are these skills valuable, they're valuable in every career I've known. The things that we teach in art of collaboration, critical thinking, communication, that's useful in any career that you have. So just making sure that we realize that it's not only the art careers, but the arts are valuable in every career. The next one, compare how innovative tools and ideas have been used in a variety of visual artworks. That's a great example of, they're saying innovative tools and ideas. So they're saying a teacher doesn't have to just necessarily teach one particular tool. Like they're kind of maybe looking more towards what their students are interested in using to connect to that standard. So I think that's a great move in that direction. Moving on to the create strand, create original visual arts ideas and 2D and 3D artworks, including drawing, painting, printmaking, fibers, sculptures, ceramics, and digital media using tools safely and appropriately, independently or collaboratively. Well, I appreciate that there's a wide variety of media listed in this. The fact that they list out particular media that could be difficult for an art teacher to either use because of storage or materials. I personally teach ceramics, but it is expensive. It is a lot of storage. Um, and yes, there are air dry clays that get rid of the need of a kiln, but to have enough funding, enough storage, enough availability, especially with sixth graders, if you're not seeing them every day, if you're seeing your entire middle school worth of sixth graders and having to store all that work, that would be quite difficult. So the fact that they list out every single one that they like that is a little bit iffy to me. But the fact that they add in to use it independently or collaboratively is a nice detail to also just let us know that artwork isn't just something done in solidarity. You use materials in both traditional and non-traditional ways to create art. I think that's a great general one where it's reminding us that yes, we can value the traditional ways of painting or drawing or that kind of thing, but we should also make an effort to introduce non-traditional artworks that will appeal to our students. Create original imagery as a means of self-expression to communicate ideas and feelings. Sounds like a great general standard. Adapt original visual arts ideas and works and those of peers and other artists independently and collaboratively. It's a good opportunity to introduce students using ideas from one another at this stage because this is when students can kind of view artwork is something that's really personally meaningful. So reinforcing that art doesn't just have to be by yourself. It can be as a studio, it can be as a community is, I think, a good intention. Combine ideas from multiple artists to create a new work of art. I feel like that's kind of highly particular of combining ideas. Um, but I mean, I feel that many teachers do this kind of thing anyways, and it's not that big of a standard that couldn't be adopted. Describe how fair use, copyright, public domain, open source, and Creative Commons affect the ability of artists to create original or derivative art. This is a really important standard, I think, because just introducing students to the concept of ownership, copyright, all of those things is really important, especially with all the digital media they come in contact with. So having them introduced to those concepts is a really good thing at that age. Moving on to the present stand, present visual artworks, sweet and to the point. Present visual artworks. That's about as general as you can get, and I'm pretty sure teachers feel confident being able to reach that standard. Improve the use of elements of art and principles of design using feedback based on given criteria. I like the fact that they are using vocabulary of the elements of art and principles of design to give feedback and not being so vague as to have it be kind of difficult for teachers to know how students should be talking about artwork. So by using the elements art principles of design, they're using these very objective types of terms to judge artwork instead of relying only on feelings, emotions, that kind of thing. Create an artist statement describing elements of art and principles of design used in personal art. My only complaint with this one is that I would like for them to explain personal art. Is personal art only art that is made by the student, or could it also be collaborative artwork where two students work together on the same piece? But then part, that's still their work contributed. It's just collaborative. So I would be interested to know what their definition of personal and personal art is. But otherwise, the standard seems pretty good. The visual art, excuse me, develop visual art presentations. This is a new one. It's one of those standards that I feel was one of the ones where they're trying to mix it in with the other arts, the performing arts. And I think again, we already have students do this. We have them present artwork, so I don't think it's anything new to us. Just something we'd have to be more mindful about doing. Identify personal artwork that meets multiple criteria, and differentiate etiquette for appropriately engaging with works of art in a variety of settings, which I think is a great objective because you want students to know how to appropriately and productively comment on artworks both at home, in the classroom, in the hallway, in an art museum. You want them to have that skill. And respond strand. Analyze visual artworks from a variety of styles, cultures, and genres using content specific vocabulary. Sounds great, sounds like what we already do. Analyze style, subject matter, and movements in art from various historical periods. Again, sounds pretty standard for us. Speculate on why the artist chose specific qualities for a work of visual artwork of work of visual art. I like the use of the word speculate here because for certain artists and artworks, we have a lot of information. We know exactly what the artist was going for. But for some of them, we do not have enough evidence to know exactly what their intentions were. So the word speculate, I think, is good to use here in that we can use an educated guess on what they were intending, but we can't know for sure because we just don't have enough information. Evaluate visual artworks using content specific vocabulary. Justify appealing qualities of works in visual artworks, which is just a matter of aesthetics. So I think that fits perfectly along with our usual standards. And develop relevant criteria to evaluate a work of art. Um, I think a sixth grader developing relevant criteria instead of maybe following or selecting criteria is kind of a big jump. But I mean, there probably are plenty of sixth graders that are ready for that. Moving on to the seventh grade. Um, Honestly, a lot of them are very similar. They're just kind of building, so I'm going to skim through even quicker. Um, it does ask to analyze how individuals and groups of artists have influenced various cultures. So again, it's reinforcing that fact that art can be both individual and collective. And it asks, identify how the application of skills and information from other content areas can aid in solving different types of artistic problems. So thinking about artwork not just in terms of expression, but also problem solving is a great way to move there. Identify art skills, characteristics, and behaviors that contribute to success in post-secondary education and career readiness. This kind of feels like more what I wish the sixth grade standard had of being more open about the careers. But again, maybe their intent was to just have it be more generalized, chunked in art careers, not thinking that deeply, and then expanding it as you went on. It does mention all of those art media again, without particularly saying how a teacher that may be seeing their entire school are going to deal with all those. But again, I think it has good intentions of being diverse in the media. And then create original art emphasizing selected elements of art and principles of design to express ideas, feelings, or personal experiences. So they're taking what they knew before and they're kind of adding on layers of depth to it. And identify the legal and ethical issues for creating derivative art. Again, that's a great thing that goes into copyright, and make sure we're being careful with that. Compare how different methods of display influence the experience of a viewer, which I think is a great idea because you can talk about how viewing an artwork in person, on the internet, over television shows, over different media, over social media is a great topic to talk with seventh graders. And describe how visual literacy skills and personal experiences influence interpretations of visual artworks. That's a good another building blocks of if you have so much information, you'll know this much about an artwork. But if you're able to grow as an artist in your artistic knowledge, new worlds are going to be opened up of knowledge to you. Compare personal preferences for multiple works of art. That makes sense. Knowing what your values are in terms of artwork will help pick up your own judgments, your own bias with other artworks. So that is a good area to be careful about. Right, now we're into eighth grade. Again, it kind of builds up and it has very similar ideas. Although, in particular, it wants to expand on explain why and how the visual arts influence ideas, beliefs, and experiences in North Carolina in particular. So I think that's going back to tying into like social studies, making sure that's emphasized. And they're doing more with the problem solving. And they asked about the creative design process and the college and career readiness. So that's that kind of grows up the idea of again these skills can tie into your life after high school. Explain how to share works of art legally and ethically in both physical and digital spaces. Again, a really important thing for them to learn, not only for art but in other realms as well, making sure that they're being ethical in the way that they use information. I like that it does ask students to organize a portfolio to show exemplary artwork. I like the fact that it asks for portfolio. I don't necessarily the exemplary artwork part. I think that having the best of your artwork is good to help kind of reinforce the student. But my interpretations of art, I'm also very interested in process. So I'd also like to see process pieces along with their exemplary artwork. But that would be the way I would expand it. Engage with art venues and productions appropriately. Yes. Okay, now getting into the high school level, the different levels used to be beginning, intermediate, proficient, advanced, which was a nice little acronym, BIPA, to help remember which level was which. Now it's going into beginning, intermediate, accomplished, advanced. So it has two A's, but again, that's not that confusing. You can just remember AC, accomplished, comes before AD, advanced. Not that big a deal. And I feel like students will feel a little bit more pride saying that, oh, I'm accomplished in art instead of, oh, I'm proficient in art, because proficient kind of implies kind of like a base level knowledge, which hopefully by the time they've taken art 3 times in high school, they feel more accomplished than they would feel proficient. And so with the high school, it has a lot of the same things that I point out in the middle school, along with the wide variety, cultural, society, historical, daily life context, that type of thing. It also asks to describe how the emergence of visual arts as an art form has influenced society, which I think could be a really fun thing to do if you're either talking about how Western art societies started using museums to signify something was art, or it could even talk about photography, how once photography was invented, we no longer needed paintings of people to look at people. We could use a photograph, so that there's different important historical context that happened, I think can be a really great thing to investigate. And then explore advancements in the field of visual arts. Again, staying relevant is always important. Identify how technological developments and new media impact the field of visual arts. Again, staying relevant so that our students can stay relevant, always important. It uses that same big chunk of the different media that it lists. Again, I'm not a big fan of them listing out these particular media because media can be so varied and resources and timing and everything. But again, they have good intentions with that, I feel. I really like the fact that they use the word experiment with ideas, forms, and meaning to create art, because experiment intends more of you don't have to have a finished product. You are figuring things out. You are taking risks, calculated risks, but still risks. So I really like the fact that they added experiment in with the standard, because as a person that likes to see the process and not just the product, that's a really important way of the way I like to teach. But again, that's something I can add in my curriculum. I don't necessarily need the standard to say that for me to incorporate it into it. Create an original planned work of art that explores a personally meaningful theme, idea, or concept using symbolism to communicate an idea. So it asks for symbolism. That's something we're well versed in, and I think isn't an issue at all. Combine imagery from multiple artists to the creation of new art. I like the fact that the standard is right beside the one on appropriation, fair use, copyright, because while I think it's good to base yourself off of other people when you're learning and growing, understanding the implications of citing the artist, of being transparent in your sources is important. Present visual artworks. Simple, easy. Revise artwork based on given criteria. I would question, am I the one giving that criteria, or is the student the one giving that criteria? But again, that's open to interpretation on purpose. Create an artist statement that communicates the meaning, purpose, and techniques used in personal art. I think that's great. I think at this point, students are more aware of why they're doing what they're doing and be able to communicate that difference. Develop visual arts presentations. Curate artwork for presentation that demonstrates skill, a variety of media, and theme. Um, Again, that makes sense because our students should be exposed to these things already. Them curating the artwork for presentation is a good word to use, because there's a lot of power in that word. Instead of just putting display, curate's a lot more professional, a lot more powerful. Explain how an exhibition or collection can be interpreted differently in varying cultures, traditions, and time periods. So that's important to realize, that the fact that exhibitions, collections are kind of in a way of power for some people, because if you're able to have this collection of resources, they're going to kind of dictate the priority of them. So it's just important to keep in mind that it's going to be different depending on what culture, tradition, or time period that's in. All right, and the respond all seem about the same as we learned in the middle school, which makes sense because assuming that beginning, any grade can take beginning, but a lot of it has to be accessible to ninth graders. It has to be accessible to 14-year-olds. So the fact that these are kind of like almost doing a refreshing of the standards from middle school is actually what I would want. Okay, and here we're on the intermediate, the second level. Again, it shares a lot of the same ideas as beginning, but just growing them a little bit. I do like how it asks to differentiate how various digital and social media and technology platforms are used to create, edit, present, and evaluate visual arts. Um, that's highly relevant right now of students. They are heavily impacted by this, and giving them the tools to help them use it in a productive manner instead of destructive manner is really important. And evaluate the ethics of making, producing, and distributing both original and derivative art is important, because we have plenty of high schoolers that are making fan art or art and selling it, and they need to know the full legal implications of that. They need to know what they need to do properly so that they don't get in trouble for what they're either reproducing or producing and selling. Refine artwork based on relevant criteria and artistic voice. I think this is the first time it uses artistic voice, which I think is an important thing for students to learn about, that they have their own particular way of doing art that has value and they can share that. Although this is still, I would say, at a developmental age where they may not have a strong artistic voice. And we also have to be careful and mindful that it's okay to not have a strong artistic voice, just to know that that is something that can help kind of unite your artwork throughout your time. But it's still okay to be in the experimental stage. Choose the best presentation format for a personal portfolio. Presentation format, I'm assuming they mean a physical portfolio or a digital portfolio, or even using like social media to present their artwork, or a website. I think that's nice that they're giving options for the students to display their artwork and not forcing one standard on them. All right, and going into the accomplished level. Evaluate how skills honed in visual art strengthen work in other academic or professional domains. So that kind of sounds like it's amping it up again, of like not just after high school, career, college readiness, but even after college, how are you going to keep art relevant for you? How are you going to make sure that the skills and knowledge that you learned helps you throughout all your life and not just right after high school? Create original art with a clear personal style. That's pretty straightforward. I think that happens usually naturally, anyways, unless you have very regimented ways of creating art. I would hope that personal style would be showing up in the artwork, anyways. Justify revisions made to personal artwork based on formative or summative feedback. I like the use of this word because I will tell students they can hear feedback from somebody, but they don't necessarily have to take it. Um, because in that one person's view, unless they're the buyer of the artwork, unless they're the person in charge of the museum that's buying your artwork, or your patron, like their opinion may not necessarily be the right one for the right situation. So just knowing you're able to justify your decisions is a great skill. And finally, we're on the advanced standards. This is outside of like AP art. This is the highest level of art. Uh, And so it has built up on all these prior standards. And it's what you would hope an artist would have all compact into one person. Analyze how visual art tools, ideas, innovations, and technologies are expanding opportunities in business, careers, and life. So great. Like, that is everything you could wish for. Create a body of work through experimentation and investigation of ideas, forms, and meaning, which I think is a great thing to do, because if a student does take AP art, that is what a lot of AP art is: experimentation and investigation. Like, that is spot on where I would hope an art for would be. Explain how to gain the legal right to use another artist's work is admirable, but I feel like it would probably have already been covered under the prior standards. But again, I think they're just trying to be super particular. And I also think their intention was like collaborations, artistic collaborations, encouraging that kind of thing, just using more like legal jargon with it. Critique personal art considering relevant, traditional, and contemporary criteria, as well as personal artistic vision. I think that's what we would hope for all of our students, is that they're able to look at their art and know what part is their voice, what part is influenced by tradition and history, what is influenced by current society and everything going on. I think that's spot on. And that is it. Those are the middle and high school standards. I hope this has offered you a little bit of a first introduction into how they are going to be changing. And I hope you enjoy the process of using these standards to help bring our students into the new world they'll be joining.